Thank you so much for this kind invitation, and thank you for the wonderful speakers for sharing your story. It has been so inspiring. Honorable delegates, esteemed colleagues, and dedicated advocates, good morning, bonjour, annyeong haseyo. My name is Humberto Carolo. I'm the CEO of White Ribbon, an organization based in Canada on the traditional territories of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. It is a privilege to stand before you today on behalf of White Ribbon to celebrate International Women's Day, a day that serves as an opportunity to recognize women's achievements and advocate for gender equality. International Women's Day is not just about honoring women and gender diverse individuals. It is about building a world where everyone can live free from violence, discrimination, and inequality. It is about challenging outdated norms and fostering transformative values. As we gather here in Seoul, we must confront a pressing challenge: the rise of misogyny and harmful gender narratives online. Today, both physical and digital spaces have become hubs where harmful ideologies take root, fueling hatred, reinforcing rigid gender norms, and undermining progress towards equality. The role of men and boys in addressing these issues is essential, and today I invite all of us to work together to contribute to meaningful change. Let us reaffirm our collective commitment to justice, equity, and a future free from all forms of gender-based violence. Many men still view gender equality and gender-based violence as a women's issue, but it's on all of us to step up and join efforts with the women's movement to create change. As a boy and young man, I grew up witnessing inequity and violence, watching the women I love experience that violence in my home, in the community. As I grew up, I became an adoptive dad of 3 boys who lost their birth family to poverty, addictions, and family violence. I carry with me the promise to help new generations of young people grow up with peace and equality in their homes and communities. Inspired, motivated, and hungry for change, resulting from these difficult chapters in my life, I began my work at White Ribbon 20 years ago this year, an organization dedicated to eradicating gender-based violence through the engagement of boys and men. Today, 20 years later, I'm proud to lead White Ribbon and foster change. I share my own connection to this important issue to help men understand the importance of their involvement in gender equality, regardless of their upbringing or their own experiences. Gender equality is good for all of us. We know that gender-based violence is both preventable and predictable, and transforming at individual and society levels are achievable by engaging men and boys. At White Ribbon, we invite and support men to be part of the solution in ending all forms of gender-based violence and discrimination. Our approach is novel, it's life-saving, healing, and highly successful, and we use positive, strength-based, and intersectional approaches to shift minds, hearts, and cultures to create a world free of all forms of gender-based violence and discrimination. As we celebrate International Women's Day, you may be wondering why I'm here speaking about engaging men and boys. To understand that, I want to share with you a little about the origins of White Ribbon. Our roots grew as a response to the December 6, 1989 Montreal massacre that saw hatred rob 14 women of their lives and forever impact our nation in Canada. These women were students on their path to becoming engineers at l'École Polytechnique de Montréal. But the young men that murdered them felt that women had no place in engineering. He walked into a first year classroom. He asked the men to leave the room, and he took out a gun and killed 14 women because he didn't think that women should be in engineering. And he injured many, many others in the way. This tragedy prompted our transformational work to challenge harmful gender norms and violence, and encourage men to not only stop harmful behaviors, but be active agents of change in the gender equity movement. My hope and belief is that one day, our celebrations of women's contributions will no longer require tough conversations about the violence and misogyny that women face on a daily basis. But today, as rights for women and other marginalized genders are advocated for, and we make strides towards equality, there exists a growing resistance, increased discrimination and violence. This is unfortunately nothing new for the movement, although it does come with new and unique challenges. One of these challenges is online hate culture, where boys and young men are being groomed to be violent towards women, girls, and gender diverse people. And that's happening at younger and younger ages. Recently, our national police in Canada arrested an 11-year-old boy who was exhibiting earlier radicalizations into misogynistic hatred. And he was starting to make plans to enact revenge and violence on his female classmates in his school. 11 years old, he was arrested, and that violence was prevented. It is incumbent on all of us to do our part in advancing women's rights and equity by challenging all forms of violence, discrimination, and exploitation. At White Ribbon, we believe preventative measures are the most effective solution in creating long-lasting and meaningful change. And we know boys and men have an important role to play as family members, as friends, as colleagues, leaders, and as allies. In this evolving virtual world, perpetrators of gender-based violence have increased accessibility, tools, and peer support to facilitate technological violence such as sextortion, abuse material, stalking, misinformation, and more. This has led to the manosphere, which includes sites, hubs, blogs, and online communities where misogynistic information and violent rhetoric is shared and discussed, which can often tunnel into extremism. This stems from a culture of misogyny that has been long embedded in our society. But we are working to change that, to dream and to transform. Studies have shown that men who adhere to rigid traditional masculine gender norms tend to condone and commit higher levels of gender-based violence, while men who are aware of their privilege may be less likely to use control and violence in their relationships. Harmful gender norms also play a prominent role in violence and hate crimes against women and gender-diverse individuals. Between 2022 and 2023, CyberTip Canada noted a 45% increase in sexual exploitation reports. While young men and boys are victimized by this too, they are also the main perpetrators of this violence. In fact, further studies show that 75% of users that engage in violent extremism content online are men. As feminist movements advance in pursuit of equity, dialogue in male-dominated online spaces often equate male disconnections or feelings as the fault of feminism, arguing that women's success exists to disempower men. This irrational thought feeds into some men's anger and hate, which can and does lead to intimate and sexual violence. Embracing equity and healthy masculinities is the way out of this harmful rhetoric and action. Gender-specific prevention and intervention methods are needed to change this culture and turn dreams of a future free from all forms of gender-based violence into a reality. But how do we do this? White Ribbon not only intervenes, but prevents. Our early intervention and prevention programs for boys and young men exhibiting misogyny or who have witnessed domestic violence have proven to be extremely effective in creating life-changing outcomes. So this is, yes, much more than about raising awareness. It's about engaging culture change, changing attitudes, minds, and hearts so that we move forward in a different way. Over the past 30 years working alongside communities and researchers, White Ribbon has established evidence-based best practices for working with men and boys. Youth that adhere to attitudes of gender equity reported lower rates of violence perpetration in all aspects of their life, including dating. Prevention supports the critical analysis of gender norms, challenges homophobia and gender-based harassment, and builds skills to question harmful masculine norms and to interrupt disrespectful behaviors. A primary prevention approach lessens the chances of boys using violence and eliminates the suffering and inequality of women and girls in the first place. Primary prevention effectively utilizes social marketing to create changes in attitudes, behaviors, and social norms in the individual, community, and society at large. Investing in primary prevention saves lives and stops violence from happening now and in the future. It saves lives and is more economical in the long term. Our innovative programs are trauma-informed and survivor-centered. Our programs are also help boys and men redefine harmful norms and increase accountability. In the digital space, our Remodeling Our Masculinities program covers a digital series featuring young social activists and community leaders that explore the topics of masculinity, equity, social justice, gender and sexual diversity, mental health, and allyship. This program advocates for a healthy online presence and socially responsible influencers. They are the alternatives to the misogynistic influencers that are so common, so popular now in the manosphere. We gotta switch those voices. We gotta empower boys and young men to become role models into the future. Most notably in the digital media sphere, White Ribbon is world-renowned for our public education campaigns that change social norms, attitudes, and behaviors. Some of those campaigns include Boys Don't Cry, which calls on boys and men to rethink harmful gender norms and stereotypes in order to promote healthier, peaceful, and inclusive alternatives. This campaign teaches men and boys to express a full range of healthy emotions, including empathy, compassion, breaking through expectations and stereotypes. We call on parents and educators to help boys and young men understand the importance of expressing healthy emotions rather than resorting to anger, control, and dominance to get their needs met. Why is it that we teach boys and young men that anger is the only acceptable emotion for boys and men to exhibit? Why aren't we teaching them that it's okay to feel hurt, to cry, to be emotional, to ask for help? We need to do that differently. And we need to start at younger ages. And we all have a role to play. Educators, parents, community leaders, faith leaders, everyone. Day after day asks men and boys to reach out for help with their emotional needs instead of choosing to use violence in their relationships. Across Canada and around the world, we saw an increase in intimate partner violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. This campaign was in response to this horrible social trend, and the way to disrupt it, call the violence out and ask men to choose a different path and commit to change. Short life stories helps men and boys understand the connection between gender-based violence, hatred, and transphobia. Sadly, LGBTQ plus communities face constant discrimination and harassment during their daily lives. Yet men can use their power of healthy masculinities to show allyship and help end the rise of hate, violence, and transphobia by speaking out against everyday discrimination and violence towards LGBTQ plus communities. My Friend Max Hate, our newest campaign, draws attention to the impact of online misogyny and hatred on the lives of boys and young men, and subsequently on their use of violence and harassment towards women and girls and gender diverse people. We ask men to positively influence the young people in their lives, to help counter the hateful voices with voices of empathy, of compassion, and allyship. These campaigns and programs can be found on White Ribbon's website and have had millions of eyes on them, with many sharing stories of how it has impacted them positively, how women and gender diverse individuals have felt seen, heard, and validated, and how men and boys have been inspired to take accountability, to shift social cultural norms, call others into action, and most importantly, pledge a future free from gender-based violence. At the beginning of my remarks, I said that gender-based violence is both predictable and preventable. We have studied the trends, spoken with communities, and many of us have recognized these predictable patterns ourselves as witnesses and survivors of violence. We know now what we need to do, and I know as a large group of committed individuals, we can do it. As we celebrate International Women's Day and Week, I stand with you to urge men and boys to challenge harmful narratives occurring in their circles, in their workplaces, schools, and communities. I invite you to have tough conversations about what this means for the future of our sisters, our mothers, our daughters, and friends, for our future too. Imagine a world where all genders feel cared about and safe, a world free from violence, a world where we can spend International Women's Day celebrating the triumphs of women rather than discussing the rampant violence that occurs towards them. Please join me in inviting your communities to commit to ending all forms of gender-based violence across the globe. Together, with your allyship, we can make waves of change for a better future. Thank you. Merci. Kamsa Hamnida.